Alrighty then, let's start. So we start with the US, and the US Constitution establishes a federal system. And so in the federal system, I will move myself here, so that I can see the slides. That's better. Hopla. Oh, perfect. All right. And so it establishes the federal system in which the legislative power is exercised by the Congress, which is itself is composed of two chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And so by Article 1, Section 1 of the US Constitution, the Congress is the federal legislative branch of the US. And so this is a bicameral structure to ensure representation by the population, so the House of Representatives, and by state equality, so the Senate. And so, yeah, how about the House of Representatives? So a few details about it. It is directly elected lower chamber of the Congress, and so this ensures a proportional representation among the states. It's the lower chamber, so the aim here is to directly elect by the citizens to represent them proportionally. The members are elected for 2 years, so that's Article 1, 2 of the US Constitution. The seats are distributed based on population, but each state has at least one representative. So that's a proportional system. That's very important to know here. That's what it means. 435 seats, so that you see there are lots of details in the slides. You don't need to learn the seats by heart. That would be crazy. But it's just like to give you an example, like to give you like something that you can imagine. The states are divided into single-member districts, so each electing one representative. District borders are drawn by state authorities, sometimes manipulated through gerrymandering. So I hope I pronounced that right. I've never heard this word pronounced, so I'm the first one to say it here. And so there are two ways to do that. So either packing, so concentrating opposition voters in a few districts, or through cracking, so spreading them across many majority districts. And so a candidate doesn't necessarily win with an absolute majority, but like we've seen it with Trump, for example, but with a plurality of votes. So that's very interesting. Also, that's a way to learn and to be able to follow the US elections. And then we're going to see the Senate. So the Senate represents the state equally. So it serves as the upper chamber of the Congress, as opposed to up to the House of Representatives, which is the lower one. And so each state elects 2 senators, regardless of the population. So here it's less proportional. Senators serve 6 years with 1/3 renewed every 2 years. That's to ensure that it's moving there. Elections are based on a single-member constituencies, usually under the first past the post system. So what is this system that looks a bit crazy here? What is first past the post? Well, it means that basically a country or a region is divided into electoral districts, that's constituencies. In each district, voters choose one candidate on the ballot, and the candidate who gets the most wins, basically. The most votes wins, sorry, even if they don't have an absolute majority. So they don't need to have over 50% to win, that's what I mean. The Senate is presided over by the Vice President, who votes only in case of a tie, so Article 1.3 of the US Constitution. Most decisions are by simple majority, except when a filibuster requires 60 votes to close debate. And what's a filibuster? Well, it's when a member of legislature, like the US Senate, delays or blocks a vote on a law by talking for a long time or using other tactics. So interesting to know here. These words, you might encounter it, for example, in an exam facts. So at least you won't be surprised, I hope. And the Senate has special powers. It gives advice and consent on treaties and presidential appointments. And so the US has a federal lawmaking. So it does law in a federal way, in a federal manner, because it's a federal system. And so they're enacted only within the fields assigned to Congress by the Constitution. And so, these competencies, they are limited by the 10th Amendment. Both chambers may initiate bills, except tax ones, which must start in the House. So that's Article 1.7 Constitution of the US. The president cannot formally propose bills, but can influence Congress politically. A bill must be approved by both chambers, neither can override the other. Bills are reviewed in committees, debated, amended, and voted upon. If the second chamber amends a bill, a conference committee negotiates a compromise subject to a yes-no vote. And so two special powers, wars, Congress alone can declare war, so that's an exclusive power, and emergencies. There is no constitutional rule, but any national emergency must be published and sent to the Congress. And so here, little schematics of the federal lawmaking. I'm not going to expand over everything because we've seen the most important. So this you can review afterwards, but like very important, very important. Very nice because it gives the overview of how it works. So I've included that in my slides as well. What about the president? Well, the president participates in lawmaking at the final stage through the presentment process. So basically, once approved by the Congress, a bill is presented to the president. And that's Article 1.7, the presentment clause. The president may either sign, so the bill then becomes law, or veto, and then the bill returns to Congress. The Congress, it may override the veto of the president by a two-thirds majority in both chambers. So very rare that this happens, but it's still there. It's the constitutional law way of putting limits. The originating chamber votes first, and then it's followed by the second. A pocket veto occurs when the president neither signs nor vetoes. So after 10 days, especially Sundays, fun fact, I wanted to include that here, it becomes law by default. If the Congress adjourns within those 10 days, then the bill automatically fails, and that gives the president an absolute veto. Any questions for the US so far? No questions? You can also say no in the chat. I can only see 5 heads. Everybody can participate, by the way. Don't be shy. 35 people, so there's no way I will remember everybody's name or everybody's face. So no, thank you. All right, perfect. Germany. Let's move to Germany. I mean, also federal like the US. So there are some points of comparisons, but you will see the comparisons at the end is very nice. Like I'm actually very excited to show you. Um, Germany. So Germany is a federal state, also with a bicameral system. So kind of like the US again, where both the Bundestag and the Bundesrat. I'm sorry if there is any German in the room. I'm not German. I'm French, so my pronunciation probably is not that good. They participate in federal lawmaking. So basically here, the legislative authority is shared between the federal government and the Länder, the states, basically the states of Germany. The process ensures representation of citizens through the Bundestag and representation of state governments through the Bundesrat. So here you can see a lot of similarities with the US, with the way it's done in the US. So what about the Bundestag? Well, that's Germany's directly elected federal parliament, and so it represents the people. So a few facts here: members are elected for 4 years, and I always put, I mean, sometimes when I can, the law reference. It currently has either 598 or 613 members because there was an update recently in March 2023. So that's, I mean, according to the book, because I think the book is also from 2023. So yeah, there is an overlap here. The elections follows a mixed member proportional system where each voter casts 2 votes. The first vote for a local district candidate. So we've seen again first past the post. So yeah, more and more similarities with Germany, with the US. And the second vote for a party list under proportional representation. Only parties gaining at least 5% of votes or winning 3 constituencies qualify for seats. That's the electoral threshold. The seats are adjusted for overhang mandates. So that's the extra seats when a party wins more districts than its proportional share, and balance seats, ensuring proportionality. And so since 2013, there were reforms that introduced a balance mechanism to avoid the negative vote value. where fewer votes could lead to more seats. And so then the representation would kind of be, yeah, it wouldn't really work then. It wouldn't really be proportional. The 2023 reform seeks to limit the Bundestag to 630 seats, and so remove exceptions to the 5% threshold. So yeah, the book doesn't really have the most updated facts about Germany, but it gives you a very big overview, like uh, a very nice one. I don't think you need to dive into the details of Germany's elections process, but it's still very important to know, of course. So here you go. Now the Bundesrat. That's the chamber representing the state governments in federal legislation. So members, they are delegates of state governments, so usually the ministers or the premiers. States have 3 to 6 votes depending on the population. Votes are cast en bloc, a French expression here used also in the book. So a state must vote uniformly for or against the proposal. Total votes 69. The Bundesrat acts by absolute majority, except for constitutional amendments, which require 2/3. So note here the exception. I think to me, I mean, at least to me, it was important, so I included it here. It has no election date or term, as membership changes when state government change. Up. So federal lawmaking, the legislative power is divided between the federal and the state levels, and so that defines competence framework. So the residual powers belong to the states, of course, to the lenders. Federal competencies include then exclusive competencies, where only the federal legislature acts, and concurrent competencies, where states may legislate only if the federal level has not done so. So it's kind of, I mean, you will see, I guess, with the EU course, but it's kind of taking uh, a EU principle here, but it's not that important. It's just very nice to know that there are some implementations. Federal laws are thus valid only when the basic law grants competence to the federal level. So here, important, you could have here a legal opinion that asks you a question, and then this comes into play. So who can legislate? That's a very important question as well. So important to know this. Legislative process. So there is a lot. Of course, I'm not going to go through in a lot of details. So the Bundestag, the Bundesrat, and federal government, they all hold legislative initiative powers. So very important to know that. Very kind of unique. Kind of what separates them. So there's the right of initiative. So all of them has it. So the Bundestag by party groups of 5% members. Bundesrat if it's adopted by absolute majority. And the government, well, in practice, it does draft most bills. So the procedure overall, there is 5 steps. There are 5 steps, initiatives and preliminary rounds, then the 3 readings in the Bundestag, the forwarding to the Bundesrat, the consent bills, and then the presidential signature. So again, here, very similar to the US process, very detailed. And so for the details, there is also a very nice schematic, very nice pics that has the 3 first steps, like in more details, in way more details. I mean, it has actually the 5, I think. I mean, at least the 3 in detail, so that's very good. So that's for Germany. Is there any questions for Germany? Is it clear so far? Am I making sense? And can you follow also, by the way? Is it all good, all clear? Nothing to comment on my side? No? Okay. Oh, what? I see someone's like on my screen. Okay, nice. I didn't know you could do that. Alrighty. Then the UK. The UK, very important. Also bicameral. So here again, we find similarities. So the House of Commons and the House of Lords, legislative power, it's in the Parliament. So you see, because we're doing this in the structure, it kind of seems a bit repetitive, like we are starting to get it more and more. So that's how I wanted to build that course, so that you can really compare easily with my slides each country's, each jurisdiction's process. So, yeah, legislative power vested in Parliament, and the UK follows the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. That means that the Parliament can make or repeal any law. So the Parliament is really, really important in the UK. So, what about the House of Commons? That's the directly elected lower chamber to represent the people of the United Kingdom. Um, so, very similar to Germany and to the US. Members are elected for 5 years. Early elections may be called either by a two-third majority vote of the House or after a non-confidence motion, not followed by a new confidence vote within 40 days, or through a statute calling early elections. The UK is divided into 660, yeah, 650 single-member constituencies, where each elects one MP using the first past the post system. So again, the first past the post system. We saw it also in Germany. We saw it also in the US. It's very popular. In case of a tie, the result is determined by a lot. Members are protected for statements made in the House or committees, but not in their personal capacity. And MPs can be suspended or expelled by the Committee on Standards and Privileges. The House of Lords. That's the unelected upper chamber. So that's composed of the Lord Spirituals and Lords Temporal. The Lord Spirituals are composed of 2 archbishops, 3 bishops, and 21 senior bishops of the Church of England. So if you don't know it, that's linked to their history, of course, but yeah, that can be very surprising when you hear that they have a whole church in their House of Lords playing a legal role. Then the Lord Temporals are composed of life peers, which are appointed for life, and hereditary peers whose right to sit was largely abolished. So yeah, they're not that important anymore, but still they still exist. The life peerages are effectively granted by the Prime Minister's recommendation, so that allows political discretion. Members are protected for speech and debate in the chamber, but not immune from personal legal action. So you see here, I kind of included something about immunity, but it's still kind of interesting to know. They may be suspended or expelled by the Committee for Privileges and Conduct. And so what about the legislative process? It's exercised by the Parliament, and so I guess also that's why the Parliament is that important in the UK for legal for the constitution, but anyways. So the legislative process is exercised by the parliament, and so that's through a structured process involving both chambers and the monarch. So public bills concern general laws, while private bills affect specific persons or bodies, so they're targeted. The finance bills can only be introduced in the Commons. The government may introduce bills in either chamber. So here you can see the mechanism within that process. And what about the interchamber relations, where basically if both houses disagree, the bill may be moved back and forth until a compromise is reached. And under the Parliaments Act, the Commons may override the Lords. So, for example, a bill can receive royal assent after 1 year and 2 sessions, even without the Lords' approval. And there are 2 exceptions, either the bills that originated in the Lords, or life-prolonging bills extending Parliament's term beyond 5 years. And so what about the procedural stages of the UK? Well, again, there is a very nice schematics, uh, very concise, very easy to understand. So I included that here for you. Is there any questions so far for the UK? No questions, that's very good. Iris de Béthune. Ah, I didn't see, I think someone is also French. Alrighty. Then let's go. We're actually on time. That's crazy. That's very good. And we also lost 2 people. Aye, 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 aye. I hope I'm not uninteresting. Um, so, France, the best country, objectively. Wait, oh no, we're not on France right now. Up. Now we are on France. Again, bicameral parliamentary system composed of the National Assembly and the Senate. Now that's something that talks to me. The French Parliament exercises legislative power within the limits set by the Constitution. That's a very French sentence. I'm sorry, I had to. Matters outside parliamentary competence are regulated by the government. Oh, something died. I think my headset. The National Assembly, directly elected chamber. So yeah, that represent the French People's National Assembly, composed of the deputies. 577 members, they are all elected for 5 years. So that's the time of a presidential ruling. The elections are based on a two-round majority system. So the first round, there is either the absolute majority of vote cast and support from 25% of registered voters required. So you can either get basically absolute majority, but that's very rare, of course, in France. Or there will be then a second round held if no candidate wins outright. And candidates with at least 12.5% of registered voters advance. The plurality suffices to win in the second round, and in case of a tie, the older candidate is elected. And so this runoff system allows voters to express preferences freely and enable strategic alliances between parties before the second round. And we've seen that. We've seen alliances in the Senate to win more, in the National Assembly to win more seats. That's always very political, very interesting. And so the National Assembly reflects a multi-party landscape. So unlike in the US, for example, where there are only two main parties, in France, we generally have, let's say, a dozen, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, from the very far right to the communist. So yeah, we have everyone can talk in the assembly. Now, what about the Senate? Yeah. Well, as the indirectly elected upper chamber, and so they represent France's territorial subdivisions. So 348 members, so less than the National Assembly, elected for 6 years, so 1 year more than the president. And we've have renewed every 3 years. The senators, they are elected by an electoral college composed mainly of delegates from municipal councils, together with regional and departmental representatives. And so the voting system, basically, department with 2 or fewer seats, they vote through a majority vote with possible runoff, so with possible second round, and the department with 3 or more seats, that through proportional representation. And so this system, structurally, it favors rural areas, as small municipalities are overrepresented compared to urban ones in practice. So that's very good. For France, we don't have nice pictures, so I wrote it. So basically, the legislative process, that's the parliament, it enacts statutes, so loi in French, in matters explicitly reserved to it, while the government legislates by regulation in all other areas. So for the legislative competence, they are listed in Article 34, or else regulated by the executive, Article 37. As regard the subsidiarity control, the Parliament may object to EU proposals or challenge EU acts before the Court of Justice. How about the legislative initiative? Who holds it? Well, it's initiated by the Prime Minister, the National Assembly, or the Senate, so one of the three. Government bills are first reviewed by the Council of State, the Conseil d'État. The Prime Minister chooses where to introduce a bill. If it's finance and social security bills, then the National Assembly is first. If it's anything territorial, then the Senate. And since 2008, the government's control of the agenda is limited to 2 weeks per month. So half of the month. As regards the amendments, both chambers and the government may amend bills. Very important, remember that, this paragraph. Amendments are inadmissible if they concern non-statutory matters or raise expenditure or reduce revenue. That's Article 49 of the French Constitution. The government may block or limit amendments by demanding a single vote on the entire bill, and the committee scrutinizes bills and may propose amendments, Article 43. So how does it happen to pass a bill? Well, then the Prime Minister may tie the adoption of a bill to a vote of confidence in the government. So the bill is adopted unless a motion of censure passes. Since 2008, this mechanism is restricted to finance, social security, and one bill per session. The 2008 reform also expanded Parliament's power So it introduced delays before voting. It allowed referendum initiatives, never used, or very rarely. And even if it's used, it doesn't have to be listened to. Anyways. And it also has been granted veto power over certain presidential appointments, sorry. Now, as regards the president, well, it promulgates laws, but has only a limited power of reconsideration. He must sign the bills within 15 days. He may request one reconsideration by the parliament, but he cannot veto. And organic laws may be referred to the Constitutional Council before promulgation. And I don't think you need to know the difference between laws and organic laws. It's it's quite thorough. I mean, it doesn't need to be learned for your course, but there was a distinction done in the book, but don't worry about it. A law is a law. Now, what about the elections process? The Constitutional Council ensures the conformity of laws and elections with the Constitution. So you will also notice we didn't really have a slide like this for the other countries. Well, that's because France has a Constitutional Council, so it will review the conformity of laws and elections with the Constitution. So that's composed of 9 members appointed for non-renewable 9-year terms. 3 by the President, 3 by the President of the National Assembly, and 3 by the President of the Senate. And 1/3 is renewed every 3 years. That's to keep it running. Parliamentary committees may vote appointments if 3/5 of members oppose. And so what does it do? What are these functions of the Constitutional Council? Well, it's the election and referendum oversight. So it's not in charge of the referendum, but it's going to look at how it's processed. The constitutional review of legislation, so it's going to review legislation to compare it, to make sure that it is compliant with the Constitution. Invalid provisions cannot enter into force, and of course to protect fundamental rights. Any questions about the French system?
Sorry, I did have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, great. So my question is about elections of National Assembly. So in the slide, I saw that you need absolute majority of votes cast and also 25% like votes. How can we understand that? Because majority it's more than 25%.
That has to do with the abstention. So basically, if that's a very good question. So 25% of the registered voters. So if people are registered and don't go to vote, for example, if you have, I don't know, 51%, but only 10% of the registered voters voted, then it's not enough. It's not going to be considered proportional.
And what to do in this situation, like to have second round?
Yeah, it's gonna be second round, like yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? That was a very good question. No more? Am I doing my job absolutely perfectly? That's crazy. That's good to hear. All right. Then we move on to the Netherlands. So it's going to be more summarized than the others for a question of time because we only have 15 minutes left. So actually, we are pretty good. I expected that we would take much more time. But that's also because I'm speaking very fast, so I'm sorry to put that on you. So the Netherlands, it's also bicameral, just like France, just like Germany, just like the US, with the first chamber and the second chamber. So the Eerste Kamer and the Tweede Kamer. I'm very sorry for all Dutch people here. The first chamber is indirectly elected, while the second chamber is directly elected. So together with the government, so the king and the ministers, they all exercise legislative power. So the second chamber is the directly elected lower house, exercising strong legislative and oversight powers. So 150 members, 4 years, electoral system, so nationwide proportional representation. That's that's the Dante method. I don't know how to pronounce that. The open party lists. I have a beautiful schematic right after. You will see about this method. The threshold is one out of 150 of valid votes, votes cast, so 0.67%. A party must gain at least one full seat. The first chamber now, the indirectly elected one, and it serves as the chamber of legislative review. So it's 75 members elected for 4 years by the provincial council members using weighted proportional representation. Candidates may be elected by preference votes if obtaining 50% of the electoral divisor. The chamber reviews the legality and constitutionality of legislation, and it cannot propose or amend bills, but may accept or reject them entirely. So it's a yes or no function. It may also signal the need for changes through a novel. So basically a government amendment introduced to facilitate approval. So about the D'Hondt method, the election system of the second chamber, that's basically here, a nice little schematic, so you can check that at home. But yeah, it's very straightforward, very simply put. So here you go. It's in the slides, you will all get them. We all get them at the end of the course. And a little reminder, if you were not here at the beginning, please send your email in the chat. I've received a lot. I haven't counted if I received 32, 25. So just send it if you haven't. Otherwise, you're good. Alrighty, so we go on. Also, I included something about the legislative initiative about the government and members of the second chamber. So here again, the 6 steps. Very nice to have. So it will be in the notes, but I also wanted to include that in the slides so that you can kind of see the structure of where the information belongs to. Alrighty then. Any questions for you first about the Netherlands? Or is it clear? I hope it is clear, but no questions, all good. Alrighty, that's very good, very, very good. Alrighty, then we are going to go through the EU very quickly, then we will have a 10-minute break, I promise, and then we will do. First before the break, I'm sorry, I have to show you the comparative table. I'm way too excited about it. Okay, so first the EU. It has a unique multi-institutional legislative process where the Commission, Council, and European Parliament they share lawmaking power under the treaties, so the TFU and the TU. The ordinary legislative procedure, Article 294 of the TFU, the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, that's the main method for adopting regulations and directives. Under this procedure, legislation is jointly adopted by the European Parliament and the Council. And that's based on the proposal from the Commission. So the Commission proposes a law, and then it goes to the European Parliament and Council. So the Council, it represents member states, and the European Parliament represents citizens, citizens of the EU. Because yes, we are, if you are in the EU, born in the EU, you are also citizens of the EU, which must both approve the proposal. There are some special legislative procedures in some specific policy areas. They are listed in 289 of the TFU. Might be nice to have a look there just in case, you know. But they're not 100. So the Commission acts as the EU's executive body and sole initiator of legislative acts. So if there is a legislative act, it came from the Commission. And it holds the exclusive right of initiative, as I've said, with limited exceptions. So very limited exceptions, I may add. So it proposes regulations, directives, and decisions. I don't know if you've seen the three forms of legislative acts of the EU. Very quickly here, regulations that are directly applicable in all member states. Directives that are not necessarily directly applicable in all member states. They must be implemented nationally. So it may differ because the directives have the goal to implement a goal and not necessarily a law in itself. So, for example, it will say, okay, you need to reduce 5% of pollution somewhere, and then however you do it, it's fine for the directive. And then decisions, the least important one. But no, I'm joking, but yeah, still important to know. The council. The council, it represents the governments of the member states and co-legislates with the parliament. So the voting may be either qualified majority voting, QMV, so 55% of member states, or at least 15, representing at least 65% of the EU population. Or simple majority, majority of council members, or unanimity, which is required for sensitive matters, so taxation and foreign policy. The European Parliament is the directly elected representative body of EU citizens. It exercises co-legislative and supervisory functions. It's elected every 5 years by universal suffrage. So it's, I mean, you know, you've probably already voted, or if not, you will. So you elect them directly. It's composed of 720 members, currently at least. It acts as a co-legislator with the council under the ordinary procedure. It can amend, approve, or reject legislation. Hop. And so for the EU lawmaking, very quickly, I really love the EU, so I would talk about it for hours, but yeah, that's not the course. EU legislation is produced jointly by the Commission, Council, and European Parliament. Again, I'm repeating myself, based on powers attributed by the treaties. The legislative acts require a legal basis under the TFU. So a legal basis means that there needs to be a basis for which the law is enacted. So, for example, the basis may be that the EU needs to protect the environment, and so that would be the legal basis for the law. That's a very simple example, but that's, yeah. Exclusive competencies, so for example, competition law, they belong solely to the EU. Why do they belong exclusively to the EU? For example, competition, which is my favorite area of law ever, because basically if it's better regulated at the EU level, then the EU will have this competence. And so competition inherently in the common market, so it's multiple member states. So inherently it's going to be belonging to the EU. And so shared competencies, for example, internal market, environment, it requires respect for the principle of subsidiarity. Super important principle here. I will never highlight it enough. What is this principle? It means that decisions in the EU should be made as close as possible to the citizens. And so what do I mean here? Basically, I've done a few classes with EU law for the EU law course. And so that means, basically, I'm summarizing it, of course, if there is a cross-border element, then it will be regulated at the EU level. So for competition, for example, it's going to cross countries, and so therefore, based on the principle of subsidiarity, it's going to be regulated at the EU level. But something inherently national, culture, for example, that's going to be regulated at the national level. Or you might even think that the EU may argue that there is a EU culture. Now, yeah, it all comes to arguments. So, yeah, it's in the end, it's how you debate it. And so, to summarize, the Commission initiates, the Council and Parliament legislate, and the Member States implement. Implement in the case of a directive, otherwise, if it's a regulations, it's directly implemented. No need to have national laws to repeat the regulations. Now, any questions about EU, about the EU? No, all good. I'm very happy then. Oh, actually, we're a bit tight. Okay, big moment, big reveal. Boom, that's the comparison I made myself. So it's a big table. It didn't even fit in the slide, but at least you have it. So that's very nice. It's everything that we've seen, basically, I think most of what we've seen, it's in one big table. Um, so yeah, so you have that. It's for you. I'm not going to go through it because we would again do 40 minutes. But what we can do is to quickly go through the comparison slide that I made. Or again, just to put it in a slide format in some words, so like further comparisons. So representation principle. The US and the UK follow majoritarian systems. Germany, France, second round. There's only the second round of France, yeah. The Netherlands and the EU emphasize proportional or mixed representation. Upper chamber composition, it's elected for the US, delegated for Germany, appointed in the UK, indirectly elected in France and the Netherlands, and intergovernmental in the EU. For the frequency of elections, the US and France have shorter lower chamber terms to ensure accountability, and others they prefer stability, like Germany, Netherlands, and the EU. Federal versus unitary balance. So Germany and the US, they are federal, so their upper chambers safeguard the state's interests, while France and the UK are unitary, though France Senate provides territorial input, so France kind of provides a balance. Proportionality of representation, Netherlands and Germany, they achieve a high proportionality. France and the UK rather moderate, and the US, it's strictly majoritarian. And then party system impact. A majoritarian system, like the US and the UK, foster two-party dominance. Proportional systems, like in Germany, Netherlands, and the EU, they encourage multi-party coalitions, and France combine both via two-round dynamics. Oh, and here I put an additional letter, I'm sorry. But yeah, I will correct that. Alrighty.